Hello, and welcome to this presentation on the Family Law Unbundled Legal Services Roster Project. My name is Janet Whitehead, and I'm a family lawyer that practices in Sarnia, Ontario. With me are some of the other members from the steering committee for this project. To my right is Tammy Moscow, Senior Family Counsel with the Office of the Chief Justice, Superior Court of Justice. And to my left is Brian Burke and Sharon Shore, both of whom are family law lawyers with the firm of Epstein Cole in Toronto. And on the line will be Dr. Rachel Birnbaum, professor at King's University College, Western University. So I'd like to get started. Sharon, what are we talking about when we refer to unbundled legal services, and what kind of services are suitable for unbundling?
So I think the easiest way to explain unbundled legal services is to look at how a lawyer is traditionally retained at the moment. Usually a lawyer is retained to start at the beginning of a file and take it through all the way to the end. With unbundled legal services, you're actually only being retained to address part of a file. That can be a large part of a file or a small part of a file, but essentially it's a limited scope. So you've all heard about a limited scope retainer. You're being retained to act on only a specific part of the file, and that can really be anything from assisting in drafting. Usually it's to attend for a motion in court. It could be to attend at a case conference. It could be to be there for mediation. It can be specifically to help in financial issues and not in custody and access. It really can be anything where your scope as to what you can do and what your retainer is limited. So it's called unbundled legal services because everything in a file can be bundled up into a package, and you're being retained specifically for that part of a file.
Brian, how can unbundling help people with family law matters?
So I think in a perfect world where everyone had unlimited resources, if you had a family law file matter, you'd have your lawyer throughout. It's the easiest to actually be getting that advice throughout, have them help draft strategic advice and represent you in court. The problem is that it is economically unfeasible for many, many people in Ontario. And this is a huge problem of access to justice, which has been noted in many reports, including recent ones. And it's an issue that the family law bar and others are really doing a lot to actually try to make a difference. So with unbundling, as Sharon's described it, the lawyer's involved in a piece of the file. That means and we can talk about how much of a piece later. But what that means is that you can limit the costs because you limit the lawyer involvement. Yet, at the same time, what you don't have is a situation where people who really could benefit from legal advice, because the family justice system can be complicated. You know, there's procedural fairness issues that come into play, so of necessity, and it's about important issues. It's people's children, which is usually the most important things in most people's lives, and their financial circumstances, which is also critically important. So it's really a societal issue, and to the degree that we can have lawyers helping people through it and navigating them in a way that the people can afford it, it adds very much value both to the families, to the children who are involved, and to society as a whole.
And aren't lawyers already providing unbundled services?
So they are, and it's a newish thing, not in the last couple of years, a little more than that, but they are, and I do it, for example. But what's not been done as much is, first of all, there's not really the scale of the lawyers doing it to make that difference that's needed for the access to justice issue to be met, that need to be met, number one. And number two, some lawyers, frankly, just aren't used to doing it. So they're not, there's best practice principles at play here. And one element you'll see, we'll talk about, is there's going to be some training involved in our pilot project that will actually help in that. So those are the reasons why.
Now, Tammy, the purpose of this webinar is to explain our group's idea for how to improve the situation. Can you tell us who's involved?
Sure. Well, as Brian said, a number of lawyers have been doing this on a smaller scale. And when we were conceiving of the project, we thought it was really important to have official support. So we have many bar associations If I name some, then I'll forget others, so I'm not going to mention specific groups, but the family bar and the bar in general has been remarkably supportive. The courts have been supportive. We have academic support. So I think our intention of bringing this to a wider scale is really going to be supported by the various people that we have. And we've reached a little more broadly with an advisory committee as well. So we've reached out to people who aren't running the project, but to try and get some input on it as well.
Now, Brian, can you explain for the audience what's being proposed by our project?
So while it would take a long time to do it, and we don't have a long time in great detail, there's really three essential elements. There's a web-based roster of lawyers who will be doing this work. So we'll have on a website that's actually going to be hosted, as we understand it, by these various groups who are supporting it, the lawyers who are involved in the project, so that public can access them with some information as well. The other element, the second element, is the training. And I mentioned training and best practice principles before. So an integral part of this project is to have training modules that will be run so that lawyers who are experienced in doing this can give very specific instruction and skills-based instruction, quite intensive, to train up other lawyers in how to do it. And the third aspect that makes this really good, and this sort of tripod of principles that we're applying, is academic research. So you're going to hear later from Dr. Birnbaum, who's on the phone, and she's an excellent researcher. Professor Nick Balla is also involved with it at Queen's University Faculty of Law. And we're going to, therefore, try to make it as much evidence-based work as we can, and also then see how far we can scale it up to help as many people as possible.
And just building on Brian's comments, the web roster is meant to address what we see as the difficulty of litigants finding this information. So we have some guiding principles, and one of those guiding principles is to make it much easier for litigants to find the family lawyers either in their community or virtually who will provide the services. And the training is intended to bolster the supply of the family lawyers who can do it and do it well.
Rachel, who will be conducting the academic research, and how will that add value to this project?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I will be conducting the research in collaboration with Nick Balla at Queen's University. Research in Canada about these non-traditional legal services for family litigants has largely been anecdotal when we're talking about, and many lawyers already are offering limited scope retainers, unbundling services, as Sharon spoke about, but we have very little research on sort of what's working and what isn't working. So this is going to be the most comprehensive study of the value and the limitations of these services for family cases, and actually the first in Canada that's going to also involve interviewing with litigants themselves to hear what their experiences are. And that also what's added to it is that it's focusing exclusively on the family justice field.
So Tammy, why is it important to provide training and best practices within this project?
Well, there are a few reasons. One reason is that we are trying to give lawyers the tools that they need to do the work and to be comfortable doing the work, because family lawyers and other lawyers have raised really legitimate reasons or concerns in terms of, will the limited retainers be respected by the court, for example? Or are they going to have problems afterwards with the insurer in terms of the way that they and the client have agreed to slice and dice the work? So the tools and the training are intended to help address some of those issues. And also it helps too with evolving areas of practice. So one area that we're addressing in the roster is coaching. And coaching is still a fairly new method of unbundled legal services. And it's a little bit different from how lawyers traditionally operate. So the training, some of it will be generic for all forms of unbundled, and some of it will be more for these kind of more emerging models.
And let me just say one thing, if I may, about coaching, without trying to summarize all of it, because that also would take a long time. The interesting thing about coaching, and it's something that I actually do when I do unbundled services in family law too, is some people view unbundled as saying, well, if you have a motion, I'll help you prepare your affidavit in support of the motion. Of course, that's part of it. But the coaching model is a bit different. It'd be, so for example, if it was me, it would me meeting with a client and saying, okay, what's your event? Your event is a case conference. And I would describe what the point of the case conference is for. I would describe where they'd be sitting in the court, what they can expect the judge to be asking, et cetera. I would coach them as to what are proper answers for questions in relation to the various issues. I would also coach them on negotiation strategies. So if the other side says X, Y, and Z, that here might be a useful thing for you to say in response, but you also have to think about A and B because that might be affected by that, et cetera, and answer any questions they have. So that's the other part of the training too. And that's part that excites me. Opening people's ideas to the other aspects that they may not be thinking of when they have this, that actually can really add value to the people, because if you can get a lot of legal information, some of it true, some of it not, from the web and other sources, but whether it's from the web or textbooks or otherwise, aspects of the legal custom and culture of what actually goes on in a family law case can't really be gotten unless you have the experience. So imparting that can be part of the coaching model as well.
And then the client can be more effective when they go to the attendance on their own, because they have a better expectation as well of what to expect and how to help them move their case forward.
That's exactly right.
So Sharon, do you have anything to add to what Tammy had mentioned earlier about what is to be accomplished by having a web-based roster of lawyers?
I think just to expand on what Tammy had touched on before is that it's really about access to justice. I think it's important to have a presence on the web. I think when somebody is looking for legal assistance, that's usually one of the first places that they now turn. It's about making it easier for litigants and self-represented litigants to find the assistance that they need. I think it's also about making it mainstream. I think it's important, if you have a roster, to get some excitement out there for the bar, for the family law bar. I think it's going to bolster the supply, and I think it's just, on a whole, going to be better both for the lawyers who are more interested in doing and want to know more about unbundled legal services, because there's now a direction for them to turn, and it's going to be a lot easier for clients to be able to find, or litigants to be able to find assistance, because there will be a roster instead of them having to call up and search out the information on their own.
And that's another point, is that we are trying to have as much transparency as possible. So for instance, if you're looking for a lawyer to give you, to do an unbundled attendance for you and to go to actually argue a motion for you, some lawyers will and some lawyers won't do that. So on the roster, what we're contemplating, because we're still building it, is as much information as possible about the specific tasks that the lawyer is willing to provide, and potentially information about the fee arrangements that would apply. So we're really trying to take out a lot of the guesswork and hunting that is currently required in order to try and match the lawyer and the client.
And Rachel, how will all of this work and the website development be funded?
Okay. Well, as the researcher and to support this important initiative, and so on behalf of the steering committee and the advisory committee, I have made an application to the Law Foundation for funding. So to do exactly what Tammy and Brian and Sharon have been talking about in terms of doing training, mentoring, creating a website, monitoring, etc., but more importantly to then be able to research all of this. So I'll be, from the research perspective, of surveying the lawyers, speaking to judges about their views and experiences with different types of representation, as well as interviewing litigants.
Sharon, what are the expectations for the lawyers that choose to become involved with this project?
I think because this is a new project, and some people refer to it as a pilot project, but it is a new project, we are asking that lawyers commit for 2 years to remain on the roster. And before we open up the roster, we will be publicizing. There will be some training criteria, whether it's a continuing legal education course or other. It hasn't quite been decided yet, but we are asking the lawyers to follow the training criteria.
And Brian, are lawyers going to be expected to provide these services pro bono?
No, it's not a pro bono service. That's another thing that people are doing as a separate thing. This is for fee, but as Tammy was saying, the idea is actually to get as much transparency around fees as possible. And again, putting it on the website that's going to be built so that people can actually be able to locate that's what this person is charging for this, et cetera. And it'll be up to the lawyers to set the fees they want. Some may say that they want to have a reduced rate, but that's not necessarily the expectation at all of the people going on the roster.
And I think the transparency and also affordability, because while there are fees, it's not like clients are going to be asked to give a huge retainer up front. So it's a paid service and it's private family lawyers only, but the client remains in control of what they're willing to pay for the services. And it's a negotiated agreement between the lawyer and the client.
Now, Sharon, is the initiative going to be limited in any fashion to any particular city or geographic area?
Oh, absolutely not. We are starting a pilot project, I believe, in Barrie. Will be first up and running, but the idea is to really have this go across the province, and our hope is specifically that it's not going to be limited geographically, and that anybody across Ontario will be able to go on and find a lawyer in their area, or somebody willing to come up to their area. Many of us do travel across the province, but it's the website will specifically have on the roster what geographic area the lawyer is willing to service. But we're really hoping that this will be a provincial project and not limited to any specific city or region.
Now, Tammy, you mentioned at the outset that this project has some broad support across the legal community. Can you give us a little more detail about what that support entails?
Sure. We're still shoring some of this up because it is early stages, but both the Superior Court of Justice and the Ontario Court of Justice are firmly on board, as well as the organizations including the OBA and the Advocate Society and AFCC Ontario, and the Family Lawyers Association and the Federation of Law Associations. And I think those are the main organizations, as well as the academics that I referred to. So as I said before, I think this is what differentiates this pilot or this project from some of the others, is that the bar is really rising to the challenge in a very open and supported way. And we're hoping that that really helps move the literal bar forward in ways that we haven't yet been able to accomplish.
Brian, I understand that there are other grassroots initiatives by private family lawyers underway across the province. What can you tell us about those projects?
Yeah, there are, but let me just say one thing first. And I want to emphasize this because it's really important and sort of underpins everything we're talking about. I've mentioned several times already now, and we all have, the access to justice problem. And I want to tell you that the family lawyers I know, and I know a lot of family lawyers, I talk to them a lot about this, and I talk to a lot of judges about it as well, and others involved in the family justice system. They are very, very concerned about the access to justice problem. I think sometimes there's a perception at times with some members of the public that lawyers are really only out there to make money. And really, the lawyers I know, they have to make a living, but they're very, very concerned about their clients' well-being, helping them navigate the separation and divorce process they're going for, and helping the kids that are involved in it as well. So that is a really critical piece in terms of the momentum and feeling of the family lawyers that I see. So,
Brian, sorry, the other difference about family law that people don't always realize is that many family lawyers are already doing a substantial amount of work for reduced rates.
Absolutely
so
right.
Any child protection work is usually legal aid funded and working for the Office of the Children's Lawyer. And then we ask them to do mandatory information programs for free, and the DRO work is done at a reduced rate. And so I just think we have to keep that in mind in terms of ways that family lawyers are already giving back.
But the nice thing to stress about this project and about unbundled services is we're not going back to the bar and asking anybody to do free work or reduced work. This is a beautiful symmetric project because it improves access to justice. But the lawyer is still charging for their services, but they're only charging for the services that the client actually wants and needs, as opposed to retaining a lawyer throughout. The client can come and just pay for what they need.
And that goes to the affordability.
Yes.
And it really is at least a win-win-win. There may be 4 wins this project when launched and when it's put together. The first and most important win is for the public, and that's a sterile way of putting it. What I mean is the families. That's how family lawyers think of it, the families. And let's even be more specific, if there's children, for those children too. So it's a win for them. It's a win for the lawyers because it gives them an ability to help people, yet also make a living because it's accessing another element of the population. Frankly, it's a win for the judges too, because the judges care. All the judges I know care very much for the families that come before them. So they would undoubtedly be delighted. And frankly, they're generally speaking delighted to have litigants before them, if they're not represented by a lawyer in court that day, because that's sometimes what happens with these, who've actually had the education that's been provided by unbundled services and coaching.
And it certainly helps the judges to make more progress for the clients in court.
That's right.
Because judges only have a certain amount of time, and if the clients are well prepped and really understand their rights and obligations, then they're more likely to be able to make meaningful progress.
That's right. And if I can just add one more win, which is 4 wins, which is again the lawyers, but especially the more junior lawyers, because to the extent also that we have this, in relation to the fact that we have this training aspect, that's something that they don't get as much as they used to. So they'll have some really good intensive training by great trainers. So they'll have a good mentoring experience as well.
So Tammy, if people want more information about our project, or if lawyers are interested in participating, who should they contact?
That's easy, me. And I think my information will be put on the screen shortly with my email, so anyone is free to reach out for more information. And we will also share information publicly as the project moves forward, because it is pretty large scale, and so it's going to take us some time to get to full speed.
So thank you for taking the time to learn about our exciting plans to improve the ability of individuals in Ontario with family law issues to obtain effective and affordable legal assistance.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.